Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from her. The house was quiet, too quiet, and the weight of Mark's words still hung in the air like a storm that refused to pass. "You're not good enough for me anymore," he had said, his voice cold and final. It wasn't just the words that hurt. It was the way he had looked at her, like she was nothing more than a burden he was tired of carrying. For years, she had put her dreams on hold to support his career, to be the perfect wife, the perfect partner. And now he had thrown it all back in her face. She felt broken, but deep down, a tiny spark of anger began to flicker. She wasn't going to let him define her worth. The days that followed were a blur. Emily moved through them like a ghost, going through the motions of her daily routine while her mind raced. She replayed their argument over and over, each time feeling the sting of his words. But slowly, that spark of anger grew. She started to remember the things she had once loved, the painting she used to do, the business idea she had scribbled in an old notebook, the confidence she had before she let Mark's world consume hers. One night, she dug out that notebook and flipped through the pages. Her hands trembled as she read her own words, her own dreams. That night, she made a decision. She wasn't going to let Mark's cruelty define her. She was going to prove him wrong. Emily reached out to an old friend, Sarah, who had always believed in her. They met for coffee, and for the first time in years, Emily talked about her dreams. Sarah listened, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "It's not too late," she said. "You're still the same talented, driven woman I knew. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." With Sarah's encouragement, Emily started small. She enrolled in an online course to refresh her skills, spent late nights working on her business plan, and even started painting again. It wasn't easy. There were days when she doubted herself, when Mark's words echoed in her mind. But she kept going. Every small victory, every step forward, made her feel a little stronger. Meanwhile, Mark's life began to unravel. He had always relied on Emily to manage everything: the house, his schedule, even his relationships with friends and family. Without her, things started to fall apart. He missed important meetings, forgot deadlines, and struggled to keep up with the demands of his job. His colleagues began to notice, and whispers about his incompetence started to spread. At home, the emptiness was suffocating. He tried to reach out to Emily to apologize, but she ignored his calls and texts. For the first time, he realized how much he had taken her for granted. But it was too late. 6 months later, Emily stood on stage at a local business conference holding an award for Most Innovative Startup. Her company, a creative agency that combined art and technology, had taken off faster than she ever imagined. The crowd cheered as she accepted the award, her voice steady and confident. "This is for anyone who's ever been told they're not good enough," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "You are enough, and you don't need anyone else to prove it." In the back of the room, Mark watched in silence. He had come hoping to talk to her, to beg for another chance, but seeing her like this, strong, successful, radiant, he knew he had lost her forever. Emily didn't see Mark that night, and she didn't need to. She had moved on not just from him, but from the person she used to be. Her life was full now, of passion, purpose, and people who truly valued her. As she walked out of the conference hall, her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Proud of you, always knew you had it in you." Emily smiled, her heart light. Mark's words had once shattered her, but they had also set her free. And in the end, she had made him regret those words forever. Emily's success didn't stop at the award ceremony. Her business continued to grow, attracting clients from all over the country. She hired a small team, people who shared her vision and passion, and together they created something truly special. The late nights and hard work were paying off, and for the first time in years, Emily felt alive. She had found her purpose, and it had nothing to do with Mark or his approval. Still, she couldn't help but notice the occasional text or call from him, all of which she ignored. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. Mark, on the other hand, was struggling. His career, once so promising, was in shambles. Without Emily's support, he had lost his edge. His colleagues no longer respected him, and his bosses had started to question his competence. He tried to fix things, to regain control, but it was like trying to hold water in his hands. The harder he tried, the more it slipped through his fingers. He thought about Emily constantly, replaying their last conversation in his mind. He had been so sure of himself, so confident in his superiority, but now he felt nothing but regret. He wanted to apologize, to beg for her forgiveness, but he didn't know how. Every time he tried to reach out, she shut him down. It was a harsh lesson, but one he desperately needed to learn. One evening, Emily received an unexpected visitor. It was Mark's mother, a woman she had always respected and loved like her own. She looked older, more tired, and there was a sadness in her eyes that Emily hadn't seen before. "I know I shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling, "but I had to see you. Mark, he's not doing well. He's lost his job, his friends, everything. He's a mess, Emily. And I know it's his fault, but he's still my son." Emily listened quietly, her heart heavy. She had no love left for Mark, but she still cared for his mother. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "but I can't fix him. He has to do that himself." Mark's mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand," she whispered. I had to try." As the months passed, Emily's life continued to flourish. She traveled for work, met new people, and even started dating again. It wasn't serious, just casual outings with someone who made her laugh and didn't expect her to be anything other than herself. She was happy, truly happy, in a way she hadn't been in years. And then one day, she received a letter. It was from Mark. Her hand shook as she opened it, unsure of what to expect. The letter was long, filled with apologies and regrets. He admitted he had been wrong, that he had taken her for granted, and that he had been a fool to let her go. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he wrote, "but I needed you to know that I see you now. I see how amazing you are, and I'm so proud of you. I just wish I had realized it sooner." Emily read the letter twice, her emotions swirling. Part of her wanted to throw it away, to forget Mark and everything he had put her through. But another part of her felt a strange sense of closure. She didn't need his apology to move on, but it was nice to know that he finally understood. She didn't reply to the letter, but she kept it, tucked away in a drawer as a reminder of how far she had come. Mark's words had once defined her, but now they were just words. She had proven him wrong, not for him, but for herself. And that was all that mattered. Years later, Emily stood in front of a room full of women, sharing her story at a conference for female entrepreneurs. She talked about the pain, the doubt, and the journey to finding herself again. "You are enough," she said, her voice strong and clear, "and you don't need anyone else to tell you that." The room erupted in applause, and as Emily looked out at the sea of faces, she felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. She had turned her pain into power, her heartbreak into hope. And as for Mark, he was just a chapter in her story, one that had ended long ago. She had written the rest herself, and it was more beautiful than she ever could have imagined. Emily's life continued to blossom in ways she had never imagined. Her business became a household name, known for its innovative approach and commitment to empowering women in the workplace. She was invited to speak at conferences, featured in magazines, and even received an offer to write a book about her journey. It was a whirlwind of success, but Emily remained grounded. She never forgot the pain that had pushed her to this point, and she used her platform to inspire others who felt trapped or undervalued. Her story became a beacon of hope for countless women, and she took pride in knowing that her struggles had a purpose. Meanwhile, Mark's life took a different turn. After losing his job, he moved to a smaller city, hoping to start over. He took a lower-paying position at a less prestigious company, a far cry from the career he once had. The move was humbling, but it gave him time to reflect. He spent his evenings alone, thinking about the choices he had made and the person he had become. He realized that his arrogance and selfishness had cost him everything: his career, his reputation, and most importantly, Emily. He tried to rebuild his life, but it was a slow and painful process. He often thought about reaching out to her again, but he knew he didn't deserve her forgiveness. Instead, he focused on becoming a better person, someone who could one day be worthy of the love he had thrown away. One day, Emily received a package in the mail. It was a small, carefully wrapped box with no return address. Inside was a handmade bracelet, delicate and beautiful, with a note that read, "For the woman who taught me." She didn't wear the bracelet, but she kept it, tucked away in a drawer with the letter he had sent years ago. It was a reminder of how far she had come and how much she had grown. As the years passed, Emily's life continued to evolve. She met someone new, a kind and supportive man who loved her for who she was, not for what she could do for him. They built a life together, filled with laughter, adventure, and mutual respect. Emily often thought about how different this relationship was from her marriage to Mark. With him, she had always felt like she was walking on eggshells, trying to meet impossible expectations. But with her new partner, she felt free to be herself, flaws and all. It was a love she had never known was possible, and it made her grateful for the journey that had brought her here. One evening, as Emily sat on the porch of her new home, watching the sunset, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news article about Mark. He had started a nonprofit organization, helping men who struggled with toxic masculinity and the pressures of societal expectations. The article quoted him as saying, "I spent years trying to be someone I wasn't, and it cost me everything. Now I want to help others avoid the same mistakes." Emily read the article with mixed emotions. She was proud of him for trying to make amends, but she also knew that his journey was his own. She had moved on, and she had no desire to revisit the past. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily felt a deep sense of contentment. She had turned her pain into power, her heartbreak into hope. She had built a life she was proud of, surrounded by people who loved and respected her. And as for Mark, he was just a chapter in her story, one that had ended long ago. She had written the rest herself, and it was more beautiful than she ever could have imagined. Emily smiled, her heart full as she watched the sky turn from orange to pink to purple. The past was behind her, and the future was bright. She was enough, and she always had been. Emily's life continued to flourish, and her influence grew even further. Her book, titled Enough, became a bestseller, resonating with readers around the world. It wasn't just a memoir. It was a guide for anyone who had ever felt undervalued or unseen. Emily toured the country, speaking at events and signing copies of her book. Everywhere she went, she met people who shared their own stories of struggle and triumph. It was humbling and empowering, and it reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place. She wasn't just living for herself anymore. She was living for all the people who found strength in her story. One day, while preparing for a speaking engagement, Emily received an email that stopped her in her tracks. It was from Mark. Her heart raced as she opened it, unsure of what to expect. The email was short and to the point. He congratulated her on her success and thanked her for inspiring him to change. "I've been following your journey," he wrote, "and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. You've become everything I never saw in you, and everything you always were. I hope one day I can be half the person you are." Emily read the email twice, her emotions swirling. Part of her wanted to delete it, to keep the past firmly in the past. But another part of her felt a strange sense of closure. She didn't reply, but she didn't delete it either. It was a reminder of how far she had come and how much she had grown. As the years went on, Emily's relationship with her new partner deepened. They traveled the world together, built a home filled with love and laughter, and even started a family. Emily's life was full in a way she had never imagined possible. She often thought about the woman she had been all those years ago, the woman who had sat at that kitchen table shattered by Mark's words. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone she barely recognized. She had grown so much, not just in success, but in confidence, self-worth, and happiness. She had proven to herself that she was enough, and that was the greatest victory of all. Mark, too, continued to evolve. His nonprofit organization grew, helping countless men confront their own insecurities and toxic behaviors. He became a vocal advocate for mental health and emotional growth, often citing his own mistakes as examples of what not to do. He never remarried, choosing instead to focus on his work and his own personal growth. He often thought about Emily, not with regret, but with gratitude. She had been the catalyst for his transformation, even if she didn't know it. He hoped that, in some small way, he was making amends for the pain he had caused her. Years later, Emily found herself back in her hometown for a book signing. The event was held at a local bookstore and the turnout was incredible. As she signed copies and chatted with readers, she felt a sense of pride and fulfillment. This was her life now, and she had built it from the ground up. As the event wound down, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Mark. He stood at the back of the room, watching her with a quiet smile. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Emily felt a rush of emotions: anger, sadness, gratitude, and finally peace. She nodded at him, a small acknowledgement of the past they shared. He nodded back, his eyes filled with respect and admiration. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. That night, as Emily sat in her hotel room, she thought about the day's events. Seeing Mark had been unexpected, but it hadn't shaken her. She had come too far to let the past define her. She thought about the woman she had been, the woman she was now, and the woman she would continue to become. She had turned her pain into power, her heartbreak into hope. And as she looked out at the city lights, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The past was behind her and the future was hers to write. She was enough, and she always had been. Emily's life continued to unfold in ways that felt almost surreal. Her book, Enough, was adapted into a documentary, bringing her story to an even wider audience. The film highlighted not just her personal journey, but also the broader issues of self-worth, empowerment, and breaking free from toxic relationships. Emily found herself at the center of a movement, one that encouraged people to reclaim their lives and define their own worth. It was overwhelming at times, but she embraced it with the same determination that had carried her through the darkest days. One evening, after a long day of filming interviews for the documentary, Emily received a call from Sarah, her oldest and closest friend. "You won't believe this," Sarah said, her voice tinged with excitement. Mark's nonprofit is partnering with a major mental health organization. They're launching a nationwide campaign to address toxic masculinity and promote emotional growth. And guess who's being invited to speak at the launch event? Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Me?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "You," Sarah confirmed. "They want you to share your story, to show how personal growth can come from even the most painful experiences." Emily was torn. On one hand, the idea of sharing a stage with Mark made her uneasy. She had worked so hard to move on, to leave the past behind. On the other hand, this was an opportunity to reach even more people, to spread her message of empowerment and self-worth. After much thought, she decided to accept the invitation. It wasn't about Mark, it was about the people who needed to hear her story. The day of the event arrived, and Emily stood backstage, her heart pounding. She hadn't seen Mark in years, not since that brief moment at her book signing. As she waited for her cue, she thought about how far they had both come. They had started in the same place, but their paths had diverged in ways neither of them could have predicted. When she finally stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice steady and strong. She shared her story, the pain, the doubt, the journey to finding herself again. She talked about the importance of self-worth, of setting boundaries, and of never letting anyone else define your value. The audience listened in rapt attention, many nodding in recognition of their own struggles. When she finished, the room erupted in applause once more. As she stepped down from the stage, she saw Mark standing in the wings, his eyes filled with admiration. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "Thank you for being here." Emily nodded, her emotions swirling. "This isn't about us," she said. "It's about them." Mark nodded in agreement. "I know," he replied. "And I'm grateful for the chance to make a difference, even if it's in a small way." They stood there for a moment, two people who had once been so intertwined, now standing on opposite sides of a bridge they had both crossed in their own ways. Then, without another word, Emily walked away. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she thought about the day's events. Seeing Mark had been strange, but it hadn't shaken her. She had come too far to let the past define her. She thought about the woman she had been, the woman she was now, and the woman she would continue to become. She had turned her pain into power, her heartbreak into hope. And as she drifted off to sleep, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The past was behind her and the future was hers to write. She was enough, and she always had been. Years passed, and Emily's life continued to evolve in ways she could have never imagined. The documentary based on her book won several awards, bringing even more attention to her story and the causes she championed. She became a sought-after speaker, not just for her personal journey, but for her insights on resilience, self-worth, and empowerment. Her business thrived, and she used her platform to mentor other women, helping them find their own paths to success and fulfillment. Emily had built a life that was rich in purpose, love, and joy, a life she had created entirely on her own terms. Mark's nonprofit also grew, becoming a significant force in the mental health space. He dedicated himself to helping others confront their own toxic behaviors and rebuild their lives. He often spoke publicly about his own mistakes, using his story as a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. Though he never reached out to Emily again, he often thought about her and the impact she had on his life. She had been the catalyst for his transformation, and for that, he would always be grateful. One day, Emily received an invitation to speak at a global conference on empowerment and mental health. It was one of the largest events of its kind, bringing together thought leaders, activists, and changemakers from around the world. As she prepared her speech, she thought about how far she had come. The woman who had once sat at that kitchen table, shattered by Mark's words, was now standing on a global stage, inspiring millions. It was a surreal and humbling thought. The day of the conference arrived, and Emily stood backstage, her heart pounding with anticipation. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of why she was there. This wasn't just about her, it was about the countless people who needed to hear her message. When she stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. She smiled, her confidence radiating as she began to speak. She shared her story, the pain, the doubt, the journey to finding herself again. She talked about the importance of self-worth, of setting boundaries, and of never letting anyone else define your value. She spoke about the power of resilience, of turning pain into purpose, and of building a life that truly reflects who you are. The audience listened in rapt attention, many moved to tears by her words. When she finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation. Emily felt a surge of emotion as she looked out at the sea of faces, knowing that her story had touched so many lives. As she stepped off the stage, she was greeted by a flood of people wanting to thank her, to share their own stories, to ask for advice. She took her time, listening to each person with the same empathy and compassion that had guided her own journey. Later that evening, as she sat in her hotel room, she thought about the day's events. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, but it had also been a reminder of how far she had come. Emily's phone buzzed with a message from her partner. "Proud of you," it read. "Can't wait to hear all about it when you get home." She smiled, her heart full. She had built a life filled with love, purpose, and joy, a life she had created entirely on her own terms. And as she looked out at the city lights, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The past was behind her, and the future was hers to write. She was enough, and she always had been.